Off the coast of the sleepy town of Ilajärvi in Finland, a routine dive turned into a desperate struggle for survival in the icy depths of the Haveri mine. A seasoned diver found himself battling against the cold, isolation, and darkness as he descended to 80 meters below the surface. What began as a simple exploration quickly spiraled into a nightmare when confusion set in, leaving him in a dire fight for his life. Using every skill and ounce of his knowledge he had acquired, he fought against the odds while a rescue mission was launched above. Lauri Marjamäki, the head of the local diving association, led the charge. He was known for his unwavering commitment to his fellow divers. Without hesitation, Lauri was ready to put everything on the line to save a life. But what exactly transpired that fateful day beneath the surface? How did Lauri Marjamäki and his team orchestrate one of the most challenging rescues ever witnessed? Join us as we dive into this heart-pounding story of survival, courage, and the indomitable spirit of humanity's refusal to surrender. An ordinary dive turns into a nightmare. The Haveri mine, now hidden beneath the water's surface, was once bustling with life. In its heyday, miners worked tirelessly to retrieve gold and other precious metals. Today, however, the dark tunnels stretch downwards. Each passageway, a reminder of the relentless pursuit of fortune that left it abandoned and submerged, a relic of a forgotten past. But for some, the mine offers an irresistible call, promising adventure and the thrill of the unknown. But beneath the water, darkness conceals hidden dangers that can turn exploration into a fight for survival. The two divers who set out on this fateful day were no novices. They were experienced and accustomed to challenging dives in difficult conditions. They knew the risks: powerful currents, freezing water, and narrow, twisting passageways where even the slightest wrong turn could lead to disaster. Their plan was straightforward: descend to a depth of 80 meters, explore the submerged tunnels, and ascend back to safety. But they couldn't have anticipated the nightmare that would soon engulf them. The calm before the chaos. On the morning of the dive, the air was still cold. The two divers carefully prepared, checking each piece of equipment with a precision that spoke to their years of experience. They knew the stakes and understood the dangers that lurked beneath. Their oxygen tanks were full, their lights bright, and their suits tested against the cold. Yet, as they slipped beneath the surface, an eerie silence fell over them, and the daylight quickly vanished, swallowed by the icy darkness of the mine. As they descended, the tunnels of the Haveri mine opened up before them, as their beams sliced through the murky water, illuminating fragments of the past. Rusted tools, broken machinery, beams swallowed by algae, and skeletal remains of abandoned carts. These relics were a haunting reminder of the mine's history. The echoes of the men who once worked in these depths lingering like shadows in the corners of their vision. The water grew colder with each meter as they went deeper, biting through their insulated suits, and visibility shrank until they could barely see beyond their outstretched arms. At around 80 meters, one of the divers, a middle-aged man with a quiet, persistent nature, began to feel something unsettling that seemed to press down on him like an invisible weight. The tunnel walls appeared to close in, narrowing as if the mine wanted to trap him. His heart pounded, each beat echoing in his chest. The familiar sense of confidence he always felt on dives was replaced by a creeping dread. Lost in the darkness, the diver tried to push the fear aside, steadying his breathing and reminding himself of the plan, but the darkness consumed him, swallowing the light from his torch, leaving only shadows and an overwhelming sense of isolation. Panic began to set in, coiling around him like a predator sensing its weakness. He was disoriented, unable to tell left from right, up from down. The tunnel walls blurred, twisting in his vision until he couldn't tell which way would lead him back to safety. His diving partner noticed the tension in the cold void, but didn't immediately grasp the danger. By the time he realized the severity, the two had drifted apart. In the isolation of the mine, the second diver resurfaced, his mind racing as he looked back into the dark water, hoping to see his friend emerge. But as moments ticked by with no sign of movement, dread clawed at him, and he sounded the emergency whistle, signaling to those above that something had gone wrong. Below, the trapped diver's thoughts spiraled. Each breath was a reminder of his dwindling oxygen, each second a countdown to a grim fate. Alone and terrified, he moved through the icy water with a growing sense of desperation. The mine, once an adventure, had become a prison. The silence pressed in on him, magnifying his every movement until the cold, the dark, and the vast silence became an enemy he could neither escape nor understand. The call for help. Above, Lauri Marjamäki, a veteran diver known for his experience and calm demeanor, felt his stomach drop upon receiving the distress call. He had known the mine for years, understood its complex layout and the many risks it posed. The mine's narrow passages and low visibility were treacherous enough, but the freezing temperatures and the psychological strain of disorientation could quickly turn deadly. Lauri knew that time was against them. The diver's oxygen would deplete, hypothermia would soon set in, and the panic could drive even the strongest to the edge. Lauri quickly assembled his team with grim determination, gathering extra tanks, ropes, and heated suits. He knew that every second mattered. A single delay could mean the difference between life and death. As he prepared for the descent, he was aware of the weight of his responsibility, not just to the trapped diver, but also to his team, who were risking their lives to rescue him in these dangerous waters. Into the depths of sorrow. The descent was slow and tense. Lauri felt the water grow colder with each meter, biting through his suit and numbing his limbs. The light from the surface quickly faded, replaced by darkness so thick it almost felt tangible. As he and his team moved deeper, the oppressive silence of the mine closed in, amplifying the dread that filled them. The water's icy grip drained the diver's strength, and each movement forward became a battle against both the elements and the chilling fear that they might be too late. Lauri and his team navigated the twisted passages for hours, their lights barely cutting through the murk. When hope began to wane, a faint outline appeared in the distance. Through the darkness, Lauri saw him, a lone figure curled up and motionless, but still alive. The diver's face was pale, his eyes wide with terror, his movements sluggish and weak. Hypothermia had taken its toll, and his oxygen levels were critically low. Yet, there was a glimmer of life in his eyes, a spark that drove Lauri to push forward, determined to bring his friend back to the surface. The slow rise. The journey to the surface was agonizing. Moving too quickly could result in decompression sickness known as the bends, where nitrogen bubbles form in the blood and could prove fatal. But each pause, though necessary, brought the diver closer to the brink as the cold continued to sap his strength. Lauri carefully secured ropes to regulate their ascent, his eyes locked on his friend, monitoring every shiver, every breath, every sign of life. The cold seemed to close in tighter as they climbed, the weight of the water pressing down on them. Carey counted each second in his mind, watching for signs of fatigue or distress in his friend, knowing that any misstep could mean disaster. It was an agonizing journey, each meter stretching on endlessly. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, a faint light pierced the water above, signaling they were close to the surface. A narrow escape. As they broke through the surface, the waiting team sprang into action, rushing to pull the exhausted diver from the water. His skin was pale, his lips blue, and his body shivered violently from the cold. but he was alive. Paramedics quickly wrapped him in blankets and checked his vitals. Though shaken, he had survived without severe injuries, an outcome that was a testament to the determination of Lauri and his team. The diver's eyes were wide with horror as he took in his surroundings, still haunted by the nightmare he had just escaped from. It was a relief for Lauri and his team, tinged with the sobering knowledge of how close they'd come to losing him. Aftermath and the haunting. Though the diver's body was out of the mine, his mind remained trapped in its dark, frozen corridors. His fingers trembled from the cold as he laid bundled in blankets on the shore, and the memories seared into his consciousness. The feeling of the walls closing in, the icy water stealing his breath, and the darkness so deep and absolute that it felt like a living force pressing down on him, had carved themselves into his psyche. Sleep became an ordeal. Each night, as soon as he closed his eyes, the cold crept back into his bones. He was back in the mine in his dreams, hearing the eerie silence broken only by his ragged breathing. He'd wake drenched in sweat, gasping for air as though he were still in the mine. The darkness that had once been a companion in his dives now became a predator that followed him, lurking just beyond the edges of his vision. For Lauri and his team, the experience was just as haunting. As skilled as they were, they couldn't shake the knowledge that the Haveri mine had nearly claimed another life. They'd heard stories of divers who'd been lost in those waters, their bodies never recovered, their fate sealed in the silent, icy depths. This rescue was a success, yet it was a stark reminder that no amount of training or experience could eliminate the mine's danger. It was a place that demanded respect, a reminder of nature's brutal, unyielding power. As the days turned into weeks, the diver attempted to regain a sense of normalcy. Physically, he healed quickly, but his mind remained a fractured landscape, haunted by memories that felt all too real. He knew that he should be grateful to be alive, but each memory of that dark, freezing prison only made him feel more like a ghost who had narrowly escaped his fate. He questioned his love for diving, a passion that had once given him purpose but now felt tainted by fear. A journey through shadows. The diver began to seek solace in solitude, avoiding friends and family who couldn't understand the depth of his fear. He needed to confront his terror, but he knew he couldn't do it alone. With time, he reached out to Lauri, hoping that sharing the experience with someone who truly understood the dangers of the Haveri mine might offer him peace. Lauri listened, his face sad, as the diver recounted the chilling details of those hours lost in the mine. They spoke of the moments of disorientation, the all-consuming darkness, and the suffocating silence that had left scars on the body and mind. Lauri, himself no stranger to the psychological effects of deep diving, offered words of reassurance and guidance, encouraging him to face his fears head-on, but with patience and caution. Together, they returned to the lake, not to dive, but to sit on its shores and look into the dark, still water. Lauri explained that fear was not a weakness, but a vital instinct that kept divers alert and careful. The diver began to understand that his fear was not an enemy, but rather a reminder of his natural reaction to the unimaginable stress and danger he had endured. The path to healing. In the months that followed, the diver sought therapy, confronting the trauma that had embedded itself deep within his psyche. He worked through the nightmares, the cold sweats, and the flashbacks that left him feeling vulnerable and helpless. Slowly, he began reclaiming parts of himself, each session bringing him closer to peace. However, the Haveri mine remained a place of both fascination and fear. He'd often visit it, gazing into the dark waters, feeling a mixture of reverence and caution. The mine was not just a place where he'd nearly lost his life. It had become a part of him, an experience that would forever shape his outlook on life and diving. To Lauri and the diving community, the rescue mission served as a sobering wake-up call. They revised safety protocols, implemented stricter guidelines, and held regular training sessions, hoping future divers might avoid the same fate. Yet, despite every precaution, they knew the mine held dangers that no amount of preparation could entirely prevent. Testament to the human spirit. Though he never returned to deep diving, the diver found solace in teaching others. He shared his story openly with aspiring divers and fellow adventurers, cautioning them about the risks while inspiring them to respect the immense power of the underwater world. His tale was one of survival, but also a testament to resilience, courage, and the will to live, even when the odds seemed impossible. The Haveri mine, meanwhile, remained, as it always was, silent, dark, and cold. A place that lured adventurers with its mystery, but held them in its grip with a quiet, unyielding menace. Divers continued to come, drawn by the allure of the unknown. But all those who ventured into the depths knew the mine's reputation. They approached it with reverent respect, each aware that beneath the surface lay forces that could never be fully tamed. The legacy of survival. The diver came to terms with his experience as both a lesson and a gift. He had been given a second chance to live, to grow, and to share his story with others. As he stood at the edge of the lake, looking out over the still, dark water, he felt a quiet gratitude that he had emerged alive from the depths and was given another chance at life. Thank you for joining us on this heart-pounding journey into the depths of the Haveri mine. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Until next time, stay safe and adventurous.